Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to elaborate on my AutoCAD and Excel linking utility that I've had a lot of interest in, but I've also seemed to have created some confusion or some areas that are not clear. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of walk you through the pieces of it and what's here, and then I will dive into how to make each one of them. So really what makes up this utility is this main, I call it an Excel link block. It can be whatever you want to call it. But my particular AutoCAD block is called Excel link, and you'll see that name here in the properties for the name of the block. It's got a workbook attribute definition, a worksheet attribute definition, which tells you which sheet within that workbook defined by that path, which cell within that worksheet, and whether or not the block is locked from updating each time you run the utility. Say you've got a value in there that is displayed on the screen now that is the one you want, and you don't want it to update the next time, you want it to stay there. Even if you change your workbook, then you would set that to true. And this is the actual text that's displayed, is the Excel link. So I think where some of the confusion came from was, well, that's great and all that the utility updates based on these definitions, but how do you make the block in the first place? So first thing I'll do is I will open this block and show you its innards. So if you type VEdit, that stands for block edit, and I click enter, then I can select that block, Excel link, that I've got here. I'll click OK, and it's going to take me to what that block is actually, its actual definition. So all you saw on the workbook was Excel link, and that's because it's an attribute definition that I've added to this block, and I've made it not invisible. Okay, visible would have been a better property name, but okay. Invisible? No, it's not going to be invisible. It is locked in this position, but that's just for my own sanity, and I keep myself from moving things around. If I would go to these other four, just the same thing, they're attribute definitions. You can see I've turned them all to invisible. So that way when you insert the block, you don't see them. And they can store definitions, they can store information, anything I want, without being displayed on the drawing. Now what if I wanted to display or add another attribute to this block for any reason? Type ATTDEF, that stands for attribute definition, and then click enter. And you'll get this pop-up here that lets you add something. And let's say in my case, maybe I wanted to add an IP address. Maybe I'm pointing to a different machine on the network somewhere where I'm going to look up this workbook. I want to set it to invisible so it's not displayed on my drawing, whatever. This IP address is going to be the name of that attribute whenever we loop through it in our VBA code, which we'll get to in a little bit. Let's just stick it over here. Now it looks just like these other blocks that are invisible and locked in position, and that's now part of the block. Pretty easy to add the attribute to a block, but what if we want to create our own block instead of using this block I've created here? So if we go in and let's just make an object, that's the way I would normally start. We'll just make this square. And if I want to make this a block, I can say W block. That stands for write block, write it to your disk, whatever. I want to pick a point. I'll make it the bottom left corner. I'll select the objects that I want to include in that block. I'm going to call it new block 2 because I think I've already got a new block that I was playing with. And then that's where it's going to write those 4 lines that make up that square to its own DWG block. And now it's here. So I'm going to erase this. See if it's already in our drawing. I can't remember now that I've done that. Okay. I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to insert a new instance of that block, block 2 that we just created. I'm just going to stick it on the screen, and it'll be, it says 0, 0 because of how I defined the block. I could have done that better. So here it is at the bottom. If I select one line, you see that it's a block reference. What if I wanted to add that IP address attribute to this block? I'll type edit. There's my new block 2 that I just created. And now I'm in the block editor. So I would type @def. Here's where we typed IP address in my Excel link block. We'll just do it in this one now. We'll leave it invisible. Stick it right there. We'll say, let's go ahead and save this block so next time we use it, we overwrite that and we'll save it as a drawing file. Perfect. Yep, we'll replace it, save the block, close the block editor, and you'll see this block doesn't have it. That's because it's our old definition. Let's go ahead and delete it, and we'll purge it from our drawing again, and we'll reinsert it. And that way, within the drawing, it will overwrite the old definition that it had stored. So if I type insert, go to our new block 2, just let it go in at 000, that's fine. Here's our block, but now look, we have an IP address attribute. Just call it that, and that will be stored with that block, and each instance of our block that we insert will have that attribute available, and they can all have different IP addresses. And now, if we were to create some VBA code to loop through all of our blocks and loop through all the attribute definitions of each block, just like my utility does, this is where you would get that data from. So back to my original blocks, I'm going to purge those out. This example utility, get rid of them. So here's our Excel link. These are created the same way. They're just no lines. There's 4 or 5 attribute definitions. It's those there. So once we go and take a look at the VBA code, let me scoot this over here side by side. You'll see what we're doing is creating an instance of Excel that is owned by the AutoCAD application. And to do that, I may have left this out on the previous version, I'm not sure. You come in here, go to Tools and References, and you'll see that I've created a reference to the Microsoft Excel 16.0 object library. And what that does is that allows us to create a variable here that I've called Excel as a new Excel application. So when we do that, and we set that variable equal to a new Excel application, there's actually another instance of Excel created. You could step through your code, get to this point, and then open up your task manager and see that you have Microsoft Excel running. Even if you don't see it open, it'll be open in the background. And then I create a variable for each one of these attributes that I'm going to be looping through in every block. So now that we've got our Excel workbook open in the background, what we're going to do is go ahead and use that instance of Excel to open a workbook from wherever our workbook attribute definition points to us for each block. So within the drawing, we loop through all of the entities within the model space. And once we find that an entity is an AutoCAD block reference, which these are blocks that we just created, and I see that the name of it, in my case, I'm specifically looking for blocks named Excel link. That's my block. So once we've looped through these, you may have 10,000 blocks in your drawing and only 10 Excel links. But once we find one that's named Excel link, we'll go a layer deeper and we'll say, okay, let's get all of the attributes and we'll store them in this list. So that would get our workbook, worksheet, cell, locked, and Excel link information and store them in this list. The next step is to loop through each one of those. And as you do, I check the name, here's the tag string, but the name of the attribute against cell, worksheet, workbook, locked, or Excel link, as we're actually calling them, what they're named in the block. And if that is the particular attribute that we are on in that particular iteration of that loop, then we're going to store in my variable, in this case here cell, in the VBA application, that value. So that would be A1 is what we get stored there, or yeah, in this case what I've got highlighted out here on the workbook or in the AutoCAD application, in that drawing file, I have A1 for the cell. So this would store A1 on this particular block reference that we're iterating through all of them, the whole drawing. Then it would store the worksheet here, which would be sheet 1. Workbook is at this definite or at this path. Lock and Excel Excel link attribute ID. That would be, what did I do there? Excel link. So if it's that, I think I'm just storing that because I don't really need any data in there at this point. I haven't updated it. So then once we're done looping through those and getting all that data, I check and see if all of those values, all those fields have some data populated in it. And if they do, I'll go ahead and set my Excel workbook variable, which is a Excel workbook, to a new workbook that is opening via that path that we looked up from the populated attribute on the specific block in the drawing that we're now looping through. So in this case, this is saying, hey, go ahead and set this workbook variable equal to the return value whenever we open up the Excel workbook at users admin downloads Excel link.xlsx. Once it returns that and we have that Excel instance here, we go in and we say attribute list and we go to this attribute ID, which will be 7. They'll stay in the same order of your blocks, or whatever it is here, 5 or 6. It would be 5. So we would say, okay, the 5th attribute list, the 5th one, which will be the Excel link or whatever number it happens to be in the object as it iterates through. It'll be the same on all of them, but it'll throw that number in so that it'll refer to it by ID instead of, or an index instead of by name. So attribute list at link, Excel link at ID, text string, which is saying specifically this text string here, set it equal to that workbook at the path we looked up and the sheet that we got that we're looking to based on the attribute value, the cell and that value, put it in there. Update that block on the drawing and then close the workbook and quit. And I think I mentioned in the first video, this could be a lot more efficient, and I've made a version of the past that was way faster. This was just a quick thing to show a neat way to grab data from Excel and put it into AutoCAD in a very flexible way. So after it does that, it would loop back around and go to the next entity. And if it was an Excel link, it would do the same thing again. Get all those values from the block, open up a workbook at that path, set the Excel text equal to whatever's in that fully qualified path, and then update it and then go to the next block. And then once it got all the way through all of the blocks in the entire drawing, it would be done. So I hope that helps. Basically set this up here to run, or we've talked about this now, so we know how to make a block, we know how to make the attribute, what they are, how we have to have a reference to Excel for this VBA code to work. Let's just go ahead and do a run real quick. Excel link XLS in my downloads. I probably have it still sitting here. See what's in there. Looking at sheet A1. So let's just call that today's date. How about that? In A1. You have to make sure you save it. If you don't save it, it's just in memory and it's not going to update whenever AutoCAD opens that particular path. But let's go right there. You can see that's the first block looking at A1. All the others stay the same because I didn't update them. but they should Excel in the background, and you'll see it update, and there you go. 220, 21, 25. Doesn't matter what text you put in, it'll just follow the actual value. So anyway, that's how you can make it grab information from anywhere in Excel and pull it in. And if you'd like to see anything else, let me know. I hope this helps with some of the questions that have popped up. So go ahead and like and subscribe, and let me know if you'd like to see anything else. Thanks for watching.